He was 18 for exactly 4 hours when his stepmother told him to get out. What she gave him would change his life, but not in the way anyone expected. If you've ever been handed a key that felt more like a curse than a gift, stick around. And if this is your first time here, consider subscribing. We talk about the hard stuff, the things that break you, and how you put yourself back together. The key was cold. Not just metal cold, but a deep, indifferent cold that seemed to suck the warmth right out of my palm. It lay there, a single, rust-pocked piece of iron, looking like it had been dug out of the ground a century ago. Carol dropped it on the polished oak of the dining room table, the one my dad had spent a month restoring before he got sick. The clink it made was small, but it echoed in the silence of the house like a gunshot. "That's yours," she said, her voice as flat and smooth as the tabletop. She didn't look at me. She was busy wiping down the already spotless kitchen counter, her movements sharp, efficient, and final. "Your father left it for you. The deed is with the lawyer. It's a barn and the land it's on, out past Miller's Crossing." I stared at the key. A barn. 2 years. 2 years of watching my father fade. 2 years of being the quiet ghost in this house that was never really mine. 2 years of her polite, brittle tolerance that had finally shattered the moment I became a legal adult. And this was it. A barn. "The house?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I already knew the answer. I'd felt it coming for months, a slow-moving storm on the horizon. She finally turned, leaning her hip against the counter. Her face was a carefully constructed mask of weary obligation. "The house is mine, Leo. The mortgage is in my name now. Your father and I arranged it. He wanted to make sure I was secure." She said it like a line she'd rehearsed, each word a perfectly placed stone in the wall she was building between us. Secure. My dad's favorite word. He'd spent his life chasing it, for me, for her, for himself. He worked 2 jobs, his hands always calloused, smelling faintly of sawdust and oil. He'd wanted me to have a foundation, something solid under my feet. And now, all I had was a key to a barn everyone in the family had always joked about. The old Blackwood property. Dad's one bad investment, a piece of useless land he'd bought ages ago and never touched. My uncle used to say it was haunted, not by ghosts, but by bad luck and property taxes. "There's a duffel bag by the door," Carol continued, turning back to her cleaning. "I packed some of your things. Clothes, toiletries. The rest you can arrange to pick up later. Mr. Abernathy has the paperwork. His number is on the fridge." I didn't move. My feet felt nailed to the floor. The smell of lemon cleaner was overpowering, erasing the last traces of my dad's scent. The pipe tobacco he used to smoke on the porch, the wood varnish, the faint aroma of coffee that always hung in the air. She was scrubbing him away, scrubbing me away. Why? The words scraped my throat. It was a stupid question. I knew why. I wasn't her son. I was the last piece of a life she was eager to leave behind. She sighed, a long, theatrical exhalation of patience worn thin. "Leo, we discussed this. You're an adult now. You need to start your own life. This is what your father wanted. He wanted you to be independent." The lie was so blatant, so insulting, it almost made me laugh. My dad had been drawing up plans for a workshop for me in the garage just before the diagnosis. He'd been saving for my college tuition. He wanted me to be independent, yes, but not like this. Not cast out with nothing but a rusty key and a lie. I looked around the room. The photos on the mantelpiece were all of her and my dad on their wedding day, on vacation. The ones of me and him from when I was a kid were gone. They disappeared one by one over the past year, like she was slowly editing me out of the family history. My anger was a cold, heavy thing in my gut, but it was buried under a mountain of grief. I was too tired to fight. Arguing with her was like punching water. You just exhausted yourself while she remained unchanged. So I stood up. My chair scraped against the hardwood floor, and she flinched at the sound. I walked to the table, my hand closing around the key. It felt heavier than it looked. I scooped it into the pocket of my jeans. Then I walked to the front door. The duffel bag was there, a generic black thing, probably one she'd gotten for free at a conference. It was pathetically light. I didn't look back. I opened the door, stepped out into the crisp October air, and closed it gently behind me. I heard the deadbolt click into place before my foot even left the bottom step. A final, metallic punctuation mark on the end of my childhood. I walked down the driveway, the gravel crunching under my sneakers. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay there, on that perfectly manicured lawn, in front of that perfectly painted house that was no longer my home. I walked until the streetlights came on, casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to chase me down the sidewalk. That night, I stayed in a motel off the highway, the kind with flickering neon signs and sheets that felt like sandpaper. I paid for one night with the $100 I had in my wallet, birthday money from my grandmother that had come in the mail last week. I lay on the lumpy mattress and stared at the water-stained ceiling, the key a hard lump against my thigh. A barn. It felt like a joke, a cruel cosmic punchline. My father, the man who taught me how to measure twice and cut once, the man who believed in planning and prudence, had left me a derelict building on a forgotten plot of land. It felt like a betrayal. It felt like he'd agreed with her, that he thought this was all I was worth. The next morning, I called the number on the fridge. A tired-sounding receptionist put me through to Mr. Abernathy. "Leo," he said, his voice gravelly but kind. I remembered him from the funeral. A tall, stooped man with kind eyes and a suit that looked a little too big for him. "I was expecting your call. I'm sorry about the circumstances, son." "She said you have the deed," I said, skipping the pleasantries. I wanted facts. I wanted something solid to hold on to. "I do. And a letter. From your father." My breath caught in my chest. A letter. "He wrote it a few months ago," Mr. Abernathy explained. "He gave it to me for safekeeping, instructed me to give it to you, along with the deed, after your 18th birthday. You can come by the office whenever you're ready." "What does it say?" I asked, my heart pounding. "I don't know, Leo. It's sealed. It's for you alone." He paused. "Look, son, I know this is hard to understand. Your father, he was in a difficult position. Just go to the property, take a look, read the letter. I think it will explain things better than I can." His tone was cautious, measured. It felt like he knew more than he was letting on, bound by professional duty. That small hint of mystery was the first thing that had broken through my numb despair. It was a tiny crack of light in a very dark room. "Where is it exactly?" I asked. He gave me the address. It was a 2-hour bus ride away, a town I'd only ever seen on a map. A place called Sparrow Creek. After the call, I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the key again. It wasn't just a key to a barn anymore. It was a key to a letter. It was a key to the last words my father would ever speak to me. And for the first time since I'd walked out of that house, I felt a flicker of something other than loss. It wasn't hope, not yet. It was just purpose. I had somewhere to go. The bus ride was a blur of gray skies and skeletal trees. I watched the suburbs melt away into farmland, the houses growing farther apart, the fields stretching out into brown, harvested plains. The other passengers were a quiet collection of strangers, each lost in their own world. I felt invisible, a ghost on a journey to meet another ghost. I clutched the duffel bag on my lap like a life raft. Inside were 3 t-shirts, 2 pairs of jeans, a toothbrush, and a worn copy of a book my dad had given me years ago. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Sparrow Creek wasn't so much a town as a crossroads with a gas station, a diner, and a post office. The bus dropped me off in front of the diner, the hiss of its air brakes startling a flock of pigeons. The air smelled different here, cleaner, with the scent of damp earth and wood smoke. It was quiet, a deep, resonant quiet that made the city feel a world away. I asked the woman behind the counter in the diner for directions. She was older, with flour on her apron and a kind, curious smile. "The old Blackwood place?" she said, her eyebrows rising. "Haven't heard that name in a while. No one's been out there in years. You family?" "Something like that," I mumbled, not wanting to explain. She gave me directions, a 2-mile walk down a county road, then a left onto a dirt lane. "You can't miss it," she added. "The barn's the only thing still standing. Be careful, though. Place is pretty run down." The walk was cold. A sharp wind cut across the fields, whipping my hair into my eyes. The road was empty. No cars passed me. The only sound was the wind and the crunch of my own footsteps on the gravel shoulder. It felt like walking toward the edge of the world. I almost missed the dirt lane. It was overgrown, more of a suggestion of a road than an actual one. 2 stone pillars, one of them leaning precariously, marked the entrance. A rusted, wrought iron gate hung from a single hinge, permanently open. As I turned onto the lane, the branches of overgrown trees closed in overhead, creating a dark tunnel. My heart started to beat a little faster. This was it. The lane opened up into a clearing, and there it was. The barn. It was bigger than I had imagined, and in worse shape. It was a classic gambrel-roofed barn, the kind you see in paintings, but this one was a skeleton. The red paint had peeled and faded to a blotchy, sun-bleached pink. Half the shingles on the roof were missing, leaving dark, gaping holes. The main doors, big enough to drive a tractor through, were warped and sagging, one of them hanging off its track. A smaller door, a man-sized door, was set into the larger one. It had a heavy iron lock, my lock. The land around it was a wild tangle of weeds and thorny bushes, reclaiming what had once been cleared. A few skeletal apple trees dotted the property, their branches bare and twisted against the gray sky. It was desolate, it was abandoned, and it was mine. I stood there for a long time, just looking at it. It felt like staring at my own future, a big, empty, broken-down thing that needed more work than I had to give. The weight of it all, the last 24 hours, the last 2 years, crashed down on me. I slid down to the ground, my back against one of the crumbling stone pillars, and for the first time since my dad died, I cried. Not quiet tears, but big, ragged sobs that tore through my chest. I cried for my dad. I cried for the home I'd lost. And I cried for the boy who was sitting alone in a field, holding a key to a pile of rotting wood. When the tears finally stopped, the sky was beginning to darken. The cold was seeping into my bones. I knew I couldn't stay out here. I had 2 choices: walk back to town and find a place to sleep, or see what was inside. I looked at the key in my hand, then at the door. Mr. Abernathy's words came back to me. Go to the property, read the letter. I got to my feet, my legs stiff and sore. I walked across the overgrown yard, the weeds catching at my ankles. I stood in front of the small door and took a deep breath. The metal of the key was frigid against my skin. I slid it into the lock. It was stiff, and I had to jiggle it, putting my shoulder into it, a grunt of effort escaping my lips. For a second, I thought it wouldn't work. Then, with a loud grating screech, the lock turned. The door groaned open on rusty hinges, revealing a sliver of darkness inside. The air that rushed out was thick and musty, smelling of old hay, dust, and something else, something like time itself. It was the smell of a place that had been sealed up and forgotten. I pushed the door open wider and stepped inside. The darkness was almost total. The only light came from the open door behind me and a few thin slivers filtering through the cracks in the walls. Dust motes danced in the beams like tiny, glittering ghosts. As my eyes adjusted, the vastness of the space began to take shape. The ceiling soared 2 stories above me, crisscrossed with massive wooden beams. Below, the floor was a sea of shadows, cluttered with indistinct shapes. An old, rusted tractor sat in one corner, looking like a prehistoric beast. Piles of rotting canvases were draped over mounds of what I assumed was old farm equipment. In the center of the main floor was a huge, empty space. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight, the bright beam cutting a sharp cone through the gloom. I swept it across the interior. It was a graveyard of forgotten things, rusted tools, broken furniture, stacks of old tires, wooden crates falling apart. Everything was covered in a thick, gray blanket of dust and cobwebs. It was exactly what I'd expected, a junk pile, a worthless inheritance. My heart sank. The brief flicker of purpose I'd felt was extinguished by the musty reality of the place. This wasn't a secret treasure, it was a burden, a ruin. I walked deeper into the barn, my footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. The floorboards creaked and groaned under my weight. I ran my light over the walls, the rough-hewn timber held together with iron bolts. It was built to last, a testament to a time when things were made with care. The structure itself was solid, even if the skin was failing. In the back, underneath a dusty loft, was a small, partitioned-off area. It looked like it might have been a workshop or a tack room. I pushed open the rickety door and shone my light inside. More of the same. A heavy wooden workbench stood against one wall, its surface littered with rusted saws and hammers. Shelves lined the other walls, filled with glass jars containing murky liquids and dried-up powders. And there, tucked under the workbench, was a dark green metal footlocker. It was different from everything else in the barn. It wasn't covered in the same thick layer of ancient dust. It was cleaner, as if it had been placed here more recently. It had a heavy-duty padlock on it. My breath hitched. This was something. This was different. I knelt down, my light trained on the lock. It was a modern combination lock, not some old, rusted thing. I tried pulling on it, but it was solid. I looked around the workshop for something to pry it open with. I found a long, heavy-duty crowbar leaning against the wall. It took a few tries, the metal of the locker groaning in protest. But finally, with a loud crack, the hasp broke. My hands were shaking as I lifted the heavy lid. I half expected to find, I don't know what, money? Something valuable? The first thing I saw was a set of woodworking tools. Not old, rusted ones like those on the bench, but new ones. A beautiful hand plane, a set of chisels with polished wooden handles, a fine-toothed dovetail saw. They were nestled in custom-cut foam. My dad's tools. I recognized the brand. The ones he'd always talked about wanting, the kind that were an investment that would last a lifetime. A lump formed in my throat. Why were they here? Beneath the tool tray was a false bottom. My fingers fumbled as I tried to find a purchase on it. I finally managed to lift the edge. And there, lying on the cold green metal of the locker, was a stack of manila envelopes, tied together with twine. On top of the stack was a single, smaller envelope with my name on it, written in my father's familiar, slightly slanted handwriting. Leo. This was it, the letter. My hands trembled so badly I could barely untie the twine. I tore open the envelope and unfolded the single sheet of paper inside. The beam from my phone shook, making the words dance. My son, it began. If you are reading this, then I am gone, and you are 18. I am sorry. I am so sorry for so many things. I am sorry for how this must look. I know you must feel abandoned. Lost. I need you to believe me when I say that everything I've done, especially in these last 2 years, has been to protect you. Carol. She is not what she seems. I made a mistake, a big one, when I married her. a mistake I couldn't see a way out of without putting you in danger. The debts she brought into our marriage were not just financial. They came with people, dangerous people. By the time I understood the full extent of it, I was already sick, and we were trapped. She thinks his barn is worthless. Everyone does. I made sure of it. I let the rumors about it being a bad investment, a money pit, continue for years. It was the only place I could hide things. The only place that was mine alone. A place she had no interest in. This footlocker contains tools. They are for you. I always wanted to teach you how to use them properly, to build things. I hope you'll still learn. But underneath them, you'll find the rest of this story. The truth is in those other envelopes. It's complicated, and it's ugly. But it's yours now. There is also a key in there to a safe deposit box. Mr. Abernathy has the other key and the location. Be careful, Leo. Don't let her know you found this. Don't let anyone know. Read everything. Understand it. Then you'll know what to do. This barn is not a punishment. It's a sanctuary. It's your fortress. It's your beginning. I love you more than you can ever know. I have always been proud of you. Be strong. Be smart. Be the good man I know you are. Love, Dad. I read the letter 3 times, the words blurring through my tears. The flashlight beam slid from the page and illuminated the cavernous darkness of the barn around me. A sanctuary, a fortress. He hadn't abandoned me. He had been protecting me. The whole narrative, the story I'd been telling myself for the last 24 hours, the story of betrayal and neglect, it all crumbled into dust. He hadn't left me with a ruin. He had left me a map. He hadn't cast me out. He had smuggled me to safety. The crushing weight on my chest eased, replaced by a fierce, burning love for my father. A love tinged with a new and profound grief for the fear he must have lived with in his final years. He had faced his illness while fighting a silent battle to keep me safe. I carefully folded the letter and put it in my pocket. I looked at the stack of thicker envelopes still sitting in the locker. The truth. The ugly, complicated truth. I wasn't ready for it yet. Not tonight. My mind was reeling. My body exhausted. The cold was becoming intense. I had to find a way to stay warm. I explored the rest of the barn with a new purpose. I wasn't just looking at junk anymore. I was looking for resources. I found a stack of old but dry horse blankets in a wooden chest. They smelled of mothballs and dust, but they were thick and heavy. In another crate, I found old newspapers and kindling. And in the workshop, an old pot-bellied stove stood in the corner, its flue pipe running up through the ceiling. It was rusted, but it looked intact. It took me an hour of work, my fingers numb and clumsy in the cold, but I managed to get a small fire going in the stove. The dry wood caught quickly, and soon a welcome, radiant heat began to push back the oppressive chill. I dragged the horse blankets over to the stove, made a small nest on the dusty floorboards, and sat down, my back against a wooden post. The firelight flickered, casting huge, dancing shadows up the walls and into the high rafters. The barn didn't feel menacing anymore. It felt protective. The thick old walls groaned in the wind, but they held firm. It was like being inside the belly of some ancient, sleeping creature. My fortress. I spent that night in a state between waking and sleeping, my mind a kaleidoscope of images and emotions. I saw my dad's face, smiling, then worried. I saw Carol's cold, impassive expression. I saw the key, the letter, the tools. It was all too much to process. I was scared, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't hopeless. I had a mission. I had a purpose given to me by my father. And listen, if you've ever been in a situation that felt completely hopeless, If you've ever felt like the world had kicked you to the curb and left you with nothing, I want you to know you're not alone. Sometimes the things that look like curses are actually beginnings in disguise. It takes time to see it and a whole lot of courage to face it. If this story is resonating with you, let me know in the comments. I read every single one. Sharing our stories is how we realize we're all just trying to find our way through the dark. The next morning, I woke up stiff and cold. The fire in the stove had died down to glowing embers. The gray morning light filtered through the cracks in the walls, illuminating the dust-filled air. My first thought was of the envelopes. I made my way back to the workshop, my breath pluming in the frigid air. I sat on the floor, leaned against the workbench, and picked up the first thick envelope. My name was on it, but below that, my dad had written, "The house." My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside wasn't a letter, but a collection of documents. Legal papers, bank statements, receipts. I wasn't a lawyer, but I could understand numbers, and the numbers I was seeing were staggering. Page after page of credit card statements in Carol's name, with jaw-dropping balances. Statements from payday loan companies, collection notices. They were all from before she married my dad. She had been drowning in debt. Then I found the marriage certificate, and right after it, a mortgage application for our house. It was a refinance. My dad had taken all the equity out of the house he'd owned free and clear after my mom passed away, to pay off her debts. The application listed them as co-borrowers. But then, tucked into the back of the stack, I found another document. It was a quitclaim deed, dated 1 week before their wedding. It was signed by my father, transferring sole ownership of the house to a trust named in my honor, the Leo Donovan Trust. My head spun. I didn't understand. If the house was in a trust for me, how could she have kicked me out? How could the mortgage be in her name? I pulled out my phone and dialed Mr. Abernathy. I explained, my voice shaking, what I had found. He was quiet for a long moment on the other end of the line. "He actually did it," he finally said, a note of awe in his voice. "Your father came to me before the wedding. He was concerned. He told me he was being pressured, that he felt he had to pay off her debts to protect you both from the people she owed money to. He was afraid they might try to come after the house, after you. So we set up the trust. The quitclaim deed should have been filed with the county immediately. It would have protected the asset completely." "So what happened?" I asked, my stomach twisting into a knot. "Your father took the papers," Mr. Abernathy said slowly. "He told me he would file them himself. He must have held on to it. He must not have filed it." "Why?" I choked out. "Why would he do that? Leverage, maybe? Or fear? Leo, the people she was involved with, it wasn't just credit card companies. It was a loan shark operation run by her cousins. Your father told me they made threats. If he protected his assets from her, they might see it as him backing out of the deal to cover her debts. By refinancing the house with her on the new mortgage, he made it look like he was all in, that his assets were her assets. But by holding on to that unfiled deed, he kept a trump card. A fail-safe. He gave you the true ownership of the house, a claim that predates her marriage and the new mortgage. Leo, that document, if it's notarized and dated correctly, it means the house is, and always has been, yours." I stared at the paper in my hand. The notary stamp was clear. The date was clear. It was real. The house was mine. Carol was a tenant in my house. The mortgage she thought was hers was secured against an asset she had no legal claim to. My father had played a long, desperate, and brilliant game. He had shielded me with a lie, making it seem like he was giving everything to her, while secretly preserving it all for me. "What do I do?" I asked, my voice weak. "First, you get that document to me. Immediately. Do not lose it. Do not talk to Carol. Do not do anything until I have that paper in my hand and can get it filed. This changes everything." After the call, I just sat there for what felt like an hour, the deed resting in my lap. The sheer, terrifying genius of my father's plan washed over me. He had lived a double life in his own home, pretending to be weak and controlled by his new wife, all while building a secret legal fortress around me. The barn wasn't just a hiding place for the truth. It was the command center for his entire operation. I carefully placed the deed back in the envelope and turned to the next one. This one was labeled, "The Money." Inside was another letter. "Leo," it read, "a man can't build a life without tools, and he can't build one without resources either. I couldn't put money in a bank account for you." She watched them all. Anything she couldn't access, she grew suspicious of. So I went old school. I started pulling out cash, bit by bit, for years. Every side job, every overtime shift, I took a piece and I hid it. For you, for your start. There's a loose floorboard under the workbench, the third one from the wall. You'll need the crowbar. What's under there is yours. Use it to pay the property taxes on this place first. They'll be due soon. Use it to buy food. Use it to get the power turned on. Use it to live. But most importantly, use it to give yourself time. Time to think. Don't make any rash decisions. Your mother and I, we never had much, but we were careful. We saved. This is what's left of that. It's not a fortune, but it's a foundation. My eyes went to the floorboards under the workbench. They were covered in dust and grime, indistinguishable from the others. I grabbed the crowbar, my heart hammering against my ribs. I counted 3 boards in from the wall. I jammed the tip of the crowbar into the seam and pried. The board resisted. Then, with a screech of old nails, it came loose. Beneath it was a small, hollowed-out space in the dirt. And inside that space was a metal box, an old ammunition can. I lifted it out. It was heavy, so heavy. I unlatched the sides and opened the lid. It was full of cash. Bundles of 20s, 50s, and 100s wrapped in rubber bands. I pulled out a stack. The bills were old and soft. I'd never seen so much money in my life. I didn't count it right then. I couldn't. It was too much. It felt sacred. It was my father's sweat and worry converted into paper. It was his love made tangible. I closed the box and just held it, the cold metal a comfort against my chest. He had thought of everything: a home, money to survive, the tools to build. He had given me a complete survival kit, delivered from beyond the grave. The final envelope was the thickest. It was simply labeled, "The Truth." I knew this would be the hardest one. I took a deep breath and pulled out a sheaf of papers, all in my father's handwriting. It wasn't a single letter, but a journal of sorts, written over the course of his last year. He wrote about meeting Carol, how charming and vibrant she had seemed. He wrote about being lonely after my mom died, about wanting a partner, about wanting a mother for me. He admitted his own weakness, his own desperation for a connection. Then the story turned dark. He wrote about the first time he saw the bruises on her arm, which she'd blamed on a clumsy accident. He wrote about the strange phone calls, the hushed, angry conversations she'd have when she thought he wasn't listening. He detailed how he discovered the truth. He'd hired a private investigator. The report was in the envelope too. Carol had been involved with her cousin's criminal enterprise for years. They were loan sharks, preying on desperate people. She was their front, finding new victims, collecting debts. She hadn't just been in debt to them, she was part of them. She had targeted my father, a widower with a good job and a paid-off house. He was the perfect mark. The journal became a chronicle of his fear. They had threatened him. They had threatened to hurt me if he went to the police or tried to leave her. His illness came as a cruel twist of fate. It made him weaker, more vulnerable. He knew he was running out of time. He couldn't fight them head-on, so he devised his plan. The trust, the hidden deed, the barn, squirreling away money. It was all a desperate, brilliant act of a dying man trying to build a lifeboat for his son. The last entry was dated a week before he died. His handwriting was shaky, almost illegible. Leo, I'm tired. The fight is almost over for me, but yours is just beginning. I've given you the truth. What you do with it is your choice. You can use it to destroy her. The evidence in here, the PI's report, my testimony, it would be enough to put her and her cousins away for a long time. Or you can use it to free yourself. The choice is yours, justice or peace. Sometimes they are not the same thing. Whatever you choose, live a good life. Build things. Be happy. That's all a father ever wants for his son. Goodbye. I put the last page down, my hands numb. The barn was silent, save for the whisper of the wind outside. I finally understood everything. The coldness from Carol, the distance, the polite cruelty. It was the disdain of a predator for its prey. And my father, my quiet, gentle, unassuming father, was a warrior. He had fought a war in secret, and he had won. He had armed me, provisioned me, and shown me the way to safety. The grief I felt was immense, but it was clean now. It was no longer tainted by feelings of betrayal or confusion. It was pure grief for the man I had lost, and immense pride for the hero he had been. I spent the rest of the day in a daze. I made a list. First, get the deed to Mr. Abernathy. Second, deposit the money. Third, decide what to do about Carol. The next day, I took the first bus back to the city. Walking into Mr. Abernathy's office felt different this time. I wasn't a lost kid anymore. I was a landowner. I was a son with a mission. I handed him the envelope labeled "The House." He opened it, read the deed, and a slow smile spread across his face. "Well, I'll be," he said, looking at me over his glasses. "Your father was a smarter man than any of us knew. Let's get this filed. Things are about to get very interesting for Carol." While he handled the legal side, I took the ammunition box to the bank. The teller's eyes widened as I started pulling out bundle after bundle of cash. It took them almost an hour to count it all. It was just over $75,000. A foundation. A new beginning. I opened a checking and a savings account. For the first time in my life, I had a safety net. It was a strange, dizzying feeling. The weight of constant, low-level financial anxiety that had been my companion for years simply evaporated. Then came the hardest part, the choice. Justice or peace. I could go to the police with the evidence my father had gathered. I could see Carol and her family face the consequences of their actions. It was what they deserved. The thought of it brought a grim satisfaction. But then I thought about what that would entail. Police interviews. Lawyers. A trial. My life would be consumed by her. By their darkness. My father's last words echoed in my head. Live a good life. Build things. Be happy. A long, drawn-out legal battle was not that. It was more anger, more conflict, more of the poison she had brought into our lives. My father had given me the power to choose. He had given me the house, the money, the barn. He had given me freedom. And I realized that the ultimate freedom was the ability to walk away. Not in defeat, but in victory. I called Mr. Abernathy and told him my decision. "I don't want to press charges," I said. "I just want her gone." "Are you sure, Leo?" he asked, his voice serious. "They could face serious jail time." "I'm sure," I said, the decision settling in my gut, feeling right. "I want to offer her a deal. She signs a document relinquishing any and all claims to my father's estate. She vacates my house within 30 days, and she disappears from my life forever. In return, the evidence my father collected stays with me, and I don't go to the police." It was a form of justice, I realized. Not the kind the courts deliver, but a personal one. I was removing her from my life. I was cleansing my home. I was choosing peace. Mr. Abernathy drew up the papers. He delivered them to her himself. He told me later that she turned white as a sheet when she saw the filed deed to the house. She saw the trust. She realized the game was over. She had been completely outmaneuvered by the quiet man she had tried to ruin. She signed the papers without a word. 30 days later, the house was empty. I walked through the rooms, the sound of my footsteps echoing. She had taken the furniture she'd brought into the marriage, but everything of my father's, of my mother's, was still there. The house felt quiet, cleansed. It felt like home again. But as I stood in the living room, I realized something. This house was full of ghosts. Good ghosts, memories of my parents, but ghosts nonetheless. It was a house that belonged to the past. The barn was different. The barn was the future. I made another choice. I hired a real estate agent and put the house up for sale. It sold in a week for more than I could have imagined. With the proceeds from the sale, on top of the money my dad had left me, I was more than secure. I had a future I could build with my own 2 hands. I went back to Sparrow Creek. I bought a used pickup truck. I went to the hardware store and the lumber yard. I started working on the barn. The first thing I did was clear out the junk. Decades of neglect were hauled away. Then, I started on the roof. I learned how to lay shingles by watching videos online. It was hard, back-breaking work. I fell, I cursed, I hit my thumb with a hammer more times than I can count. But every nail I drove, every board I replaced, felt like I was healing a piece of myself. I hired a local contractor to help me with the big stuff, running new electrical wiring, putting in plumbing. I learned from him, working alongside him every day. The townspeople, who had first been suspicious of the stranger working on the old Blackwood place, started to warm up. The woman from the diner would drop off pies. An old farmer down the road offered me the use of his tools. They saw I wasn't some developer looking to tear the place down. I was building, I was restoring. Slowly, painstakingly, the barn came back to life. I replaced the rotten siding, board by board. I installed big new windows that flooded the space with light. I scrubbed the old beams, revealing the beautiful, rich color of the aged wood. I turned the old workshop into a modern one, setting up my father's tools on the workbench he had unknowingly built for me. I framed out a small apartment in what used to be the hayloft, with a bedroom that looked out over the apple trees. I built my own kitchen cabinets, my own bed frame, my own table, using the skills my father had wanted to teach me. With every cut, every joint, I felt him there with me. It's been a year now. The barn is my home. It's warm and bright, filled with the smell of sawdust and fresh coffee. It's no longer a ruin or a fortress. It's a home, built not just of wood and nails, but of love and sacrifice. It's a testament to a father who fought a hidden war to give his son a future. I didn't choose justice in a courtroom. I chose the quiet justice of a life well lived. I chose to build instead of destroy. I chose peace. And I found it here, in this barn everyone avoided, this inheritance that everyone thought was worthless. It didn't just save me by giving me money or a roof over my head. It saved me by giving me back my father. It gave me back the truth of who he was, and in doing so, it showed me who I could be. So, what's the lesson in all of this? I think it's that inheritance isn't always about what's written in a will. The true legacies are the ones that are hidden, the lessons, the strength, the love that's left behind for us to find when we need it most. It's the story of who we come from and the tools we're given to build our own way forward. I want to thank you for listening to my story. If you've made it this far, it means something and it spoke to you. Maybe you've had to find your own inheritance or build your own sanctuary. If you feel comfortable, share a piece of your story in the comments below. This channel is a community for people who understand that the deepest wounds often lead to the greatest strength. Your story matters, and if you haven't already, please subscribe and join us. There are more stories to tell. There's more building to do.